Is that okay? Okay. Louder? Okay, there we go. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming up here. Some of you are pretty close by, and some of you came a long way, and I really appreciate the trek to Newburgh and also navigating the parking because it's a little crazy sometimes. I'm Stephanie Still-Brown. Welcome to my studio. And I have these amazing people here who know so much more about different aspects of this world than I do, and I'm really excited that they're here with me. Emmaline Long, Laura Sansone. Is it Sansone or Sansone? Sansone. And Harry Heissmann. And they're all going to help me just kind of have this conversation about Longwool, which has a lot of the properties of wool, but it also acts differently. And as a weaver, that's what I'm really excited about. I feel like I've barely scratched the surface on what it can do in the woven textile and how we can play with it, but also in how do we get it up into the mill stream so that we have more access to it. I had to hand spin most of mine. I'm not a spinner. It's long and arduous. It could have been so much better if I had mill spun yarn, but I think it takes a lot of pull from everybody trying to get this into the market for it to be worth the mills getting it into their stream. So a little bit about like my journey into this. Professionally, I mainly work in linens, but I have this other side that's a passion side of local resources and underused resources. And when I moved to New York, wool is what we do here, as it turns out, really, really well. And of course went to sheep and wool and started talking to a lot of farmers, and then had a lot of conversations over the next year trying to figure out how does that apply over to interiors, because I mainly work in the interior textiles field. And what would be best used there, but is also most underused in the wool arena. And long wool kept coming up. It doesn't apply the same way and everyone's going to correct me here on anything that I miss. It doesn't apply the same way to the wool pool or to the standard selling into the mills that shorter, finer wools work in. So Siri Swanson hooked me up with Emmaline, and who has this amazing flock of Lincoln Longwools, and she also focuses on both whites but also colored breeds. And so all the different colors you're seeing here, except for the dyed black, are from her, and she's got fleeces in the back, and you can see the amazing colors that she breeds. And so we worked together, and I bought some fleeces from her and ended up doing kind of concept pieces. So I worked through a bunch of samples and into the concept pieces of just like, well, what could we do with it? What I know about long wool, or I started out knowing, is that it's very durable. And so that was my thought. It's like, well, let me just focus on the durability. And then I realized that either I need to pay to get it all tested by the labs, or I need to wait 80 years and see if it actually outlasted in my samples. And didn't have time for any of that or want to spend the money on it. So instead, I started just playing with it and hoping that something else would happen. And what I found is that it's extraordinary in the woven. And it acts so differently that we can really visually play with it way before we just talk about durability. Because I feel like when it comes to the consumer, durability is great, but they want to see something. And so that's where my concept pieces have all come from. What I learned, and again, people are going to help me out here to say what I'm missing, because I feel like I've barely scratched the surface, is that, one, it doesn't shrink. Hardly at all. It doesn't shrink even as much as linen does, which makes it very interesting to interplay with other fibers. And so in this piece, the black with the checkerboard, and this piece here with the white stripes, I was playing specifically with the lack of shrinkage and seeing what we could pop out of there. The other thing is it has this beautiful luster, which you can see a little bit more in this one because it is a mill-spun yarn. It's a mill-spun Wensleydale. But otherwise, the hand spuns you don't see because I'm not a spinner. I started spinning for this, and I know where my talents are. It's in weaving, it's not in spinning. So, you have to look past that and know that it could get so much better. But you can still see the luster. It still has this wonderful shine. The other thing it does is it halos more like mohair. Jessica?
I'm not familiar with that term, wool. Could you define what it is?
I'm going to pull Emmaline in.
Yeah, so
We can take a little bit of a step back. My name is Emmaline Long. I'm the owner of Orchard View Lincoln Longwools. I reside between Buffalo and Rochester, New York, so about 5 hours away. And I've been raising sheep since I was 12 years old. And this today makes me so excited because for over half my life, I've been trying to figure out how to make people as passionate about wool and my long wools as I am. So I'm really excited that, maybe after 20 years, we're finally getting somewhere. But I fell into sheep. I guess I joke that I was born loving sheep. I've never had another favorite animal. And at 12 years old, I convinced my parents that I wasn't giving up this dream, and I've been doing it ever since. And I happened to see the Lincoln Longwool breed at a historical museum near me, and I said, Dad, that's what I want. And that's what I got, and that's what I've had for over 20 years. So when we talk about wool, what is the terms that you're most familiar with? If you were to go buy a wool sweater, what kind of wool would it be? Merino, super fine, exactly. And that's what our industry, especially the textile and clothing industry, has decided we want. Because it's next to skin soft and it sounds really great, right? Super fine, super soft. And that happens to be merino. Sheep come in different breeds, just like dogs come in different breeds, just like cows come in different breeds. And each of those breeds has different characteristics. Merino happens to be super fine or fine. And that's based on the actual fiber diameter. So think your hair, right? A fiber of wool has a diameter to it, and we classify different breeds of sheep by that fiber diameter. Lincoln Longwools, which is a lot of what Stephanie's been playing around with and what my sheep are, fall on the absolute other end of the spectrum. So this is a lock of wool that I actually picked up from a flock called the Risby flock in the UK. This is from what's called a shearling. So this is about 1.5 years worth of wool. So this is what the Lincoln can do. This is why we call it long wool. Merinos cannot do this. They are very short stapled. Staple is what we call the actual length of the wool. And now what Lincolns and other long wools happen to be is very coarse. So you often hear people speak about long wools as coarse wools because of the actual fiber diameter. You guys can pass this around. Case, can you get the ball of yarn too that's over there? It's a couple years old, so it may not still smell sheepy, but so because long wools are also called coarse wools, and because they are not that next to skin soft, it has kind of after the Great Depression, when this type of wool was used for things like drapes and carpets and high-end suits, kind of fell out of favor, because after the Great Depression, nobody had any use anymore for high-end suits and high-end fabrics that would have been made with long wools. And ever since then, fine wools have kind of come up as the more popular in fabric design, which has made it awfully challenging for me as a fiber producer to find a viable market for what I produce. And we're also passing around the ball of yarn that was actually tied on your bags, but you can look at that and see the shine, and that shine is what we refer to as luster, and it has to do with how the actual scales of the fiber itself kind of lay against each other, and that is very unique to long wools. That was amazing, thank you.
Does that make more sense? The worsted, the yarn? Where do you have that spun? Do they do a full worsted or the semi? No, semi. Semi? Which is why we have Laura here. Because we don't have the ability to do full worsted on small scale here in the U.S., do.
Jagger was doing it.
And then.
Yeah, and just to let you know what. Yeah, so that refers to how the fiber's processed. Like it for a worsted or semi-worsted, the fiber actually gets combed and pin drafted, so it goes through an extra step of processing, as opposed to woolen spinning, where you're not combing the fibers at all, and they're not aligning, and they're like crisscrossing a little bit more, and shorter fibers do better. They're appropriate to be woolen spun rather than worsted or semi-worsted spun. You need to have fibers at least 3 inches to be like semi-worsted spun. So that distinguishes those two spinning types.
So those are the two different preps, but they are with the long wool. The one on your left is the woolen prep, and the one on the right is the worsted prep.
So I work also with long wool, and I particularly the breed Romney long wool is mainly what I've been working with, because we have a lot of Romney sheep growing, being cultivated here in New York State. And maybe I should back up and just introduce myself. I'm Laura Sansone, and I run a textile design and consulting company called New York Textile Lab. And I connect designers to climate beneficial yarns and textiles. So I also oversee an environmental program in the work that I do. It's called Climate Beneficial. It is an environmental program and an industry verification. And that happens through Fibershed, which is a nonprofit organization that works to grow regional fiber systems internationally. And they are the governing body over the climate beneficial verification. So I work with growers who are raising sheep and alpacas, who are practicing certain practices on their farm that are designed to sink carbon in the soil, to sequester carbon. So they're optimizing their on-the-farm practices to sink carbon. But anyway, I just wanted to introduce myself because I just started talking about the yarn.
We all kind of jumped right in, but I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, but yeah, so I don't know if I was...
We were talking about prep and the difference between...
Oh, right. I was just going to mention that this year, so I get my fiber, my yarn processed in different mills. And I've worked with semi-worsted mills. This year, mills are closing on a regular basis, by the way, like our domestic mills. It's really, we have very little infrastructure here left in the United States to begin with, and unfortunately, mills are constantly closing. So the mill that where we used to spin in Pennsylvania closed recently. And so we moved our spinning to another mill in Connecticut called American Woolen, and they are a woolen mill. So they took our wool and they actually cut it. So to be continued, because I haven't received the wool, the yarn yet, but it looks beautiful. I saw pictures of it, and they sent me some skeins, which I'll be receiving probably on Monday. Anyway, the fiber needs to be a certain length, and if you're going to give them some long wool, the mill will need to cut it
To go into the woolen.
to go into the
spin
woolen spinning
mill.
system.
Do you want to talk about the difference between woolen and worsted now that we're throwing those terms around and
Yeah, so
why it matters?
so that has to do with this combing that I mentioned earlier. So the worsted is the fiber goes through an extra step of combing, where you align the fibers, and a pin drafter, which is another processing step in the spinning process. Whereas woolen, they're not doing. The fiber isn't combed that way.
Yep.
You're most hand spinning woolen, or therefore, like, what is hand spinning and how is it?
Depends. I think it depends how much you card your fiber.
So,
do you wanna-
and I didn't hear the full.
I was just asking, how does hand spinning fit into those terminologies?
So the nice thing about hand spinning is that you can control all of your prep from the start. So you can either do a true woolen all the way through. And I have my wheel here. Again, I'm not a spinner, but I've done a lot of spinning. So I can demonstrate any of that. Or you can do a true worsted. Most of the mills, again, step in, most of the smaller mills here do a semi-worsted, which is kind of like you get half of one and half of the other. There's a few mills that will do a true woolen and a true worsted. So the value of those on the textile design side is that the true woolen gives you that bouncy, juicy type of wool that gives you like a good, thick sweater. But the true worsted will give you that really fine, thin, shiny yarn that's very strong. And you can get a very nice, fine, drapey fabric out of it. And that's what we haven't been able to figure out of the larger mills, how to get it up out of the hand spinning range to get those qualities out of the yarns. And the long wool does the best with a true worsted preparation. So that's one of the challenges, but it does very nicely in a semi-worsted, just not a true.
The Longwool does a very nice true worsted,
Yeah,
because I thought that shorter was better for worsted, shorter fibers.
shorter better for woolen. Anybody, any other, and I know we've got a number of spinners here too, so any other thoughts on that? But this has been my experience so far, is that the long wool is best for. Oh, please do, please do.
No, but
Yeah.
worsted fibers are parallel. So the woolen fiber, when they spin, they kind of are very smooth. Sorry. Oh, no. And woolen fibers, you roll it into a rolag when you process it, and it's sort of like coiled on itself.
So here's the,
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, sorry. No, that's right. And there's actually a true rolag going around right now. That is, it's like a cyclone. It looks like a cyclone. Cyclone. Good to see. And then this is the pin drafted roving.
you probably wouldn't know the difference.
Yeah, it goes through less pin drafting, I believe.
Yeah. So what we're kind of touching on here is one of the big challenges for me as a producer when I'm trying to connect with people in the design world. And that is there are so many steps along the way to get from me as the person who's producing the fiber to Harry, who's going to be using it in his commercial or his, in his residential designs. When I want to get yarn made for the hand knitter market, I first have to start by shearing the sheep, right? That's how we get the wool. And you can, in the back, I've got a full fleece, so you can see what it looks like coming just off the sheep. But that looks very different than the upholstery that you're going to be putting on your chair, right? It goes through many steps to get there. The first is it has to be washed. We have to wash out any manure, dirt, the lanolin that is naturally occurring, right? Then we have to, if we're going to be doing a worsted yarn, we have to card it and brush it, essentially, and that's what we're passing around right now would be that step. So if you were a hand spinner and you're like, I don't want to prep my own fleece, I don't want to go through all of that, this is what you would buy. It's called roving. So that's kind of the first step. Then you have to decide, as Stephanie did, I want a 1 ply, this is the thickness of yarn that I want, and you then spin that, right, to create the yarn. And then you can ply that to get different thicknesses. So essentially twist 2 finer strands together to get a thicker strand. And there are people like me that specialize in producing the wool. There are mills that sometimes wash, sometimes not. We have actually one of our huge resources that we have left is a what we call a scouring plant down in the Carolinas. Chargers is what it's called, and they're a commercial scouring plant. These are all over in the UK. We have essentially one left here. So they take huge amounts of wool and wash it in very, very hot water, and that process is called scouring to take all of the lanolin out. Then they would then send that to mills. And then the mills would spin it. Now, if you're Harry and you say, I love what you're doing there, but I want it to be green, you then have to dye the yarn or the wool, depending on what process you're going to do. And that is a whole other specialty. And we tragically lost one of the best dye mills in the US down in Philadelphia a couple of years ago that was actually doing a lot of the dyeing for Ralph Lauren and some of the bigger designers, and they're gone. So as Laura mentioned, we keep losing all of these kind of smaller businesses that focus on these specialty parts of this industry, which makes it very difficult to go from me at the farm to Harry as the designer and getting these pieces into people's homes or into kind of the design world and actually being practically used. So there's kind of these challenges along the way that we're trying to focus on as an industry, but it's very hard when everyone sort of has their own specialty.
And then on that, one of the things that I found is that most of the local yarn, what? A darling baby? Hi, Michelle. Oh, yes. such a big, yeah. Cost? I mean, could we like do like a, everyone throw up the reason? We've got so many reasons.
I mean, we've been outsourcing our production in this country since like the 1970s, you know. So this has been decades in the working, you know. So you know, we're just, I mean, it's about you know, our capitalist system and the lowest price point possible, and you know, I mean, it's very hard to meet, you know, the price point of things coming from overseas, and you know, and these mills struggle to match, you know, the price of manufacturing, and that's part of it. I mean, Littlewoods closed, as Emmaline mentioned. That was the dye house that was in Pennsylvania, and that was like a domino effect, and that caused Kramer to close, which was the spinning mill that we used to use that spun our semi-worsted fiber. So you see what happens is like there's a lot of precarity. One thing shuts down and it impacts another thing. So yeah, we're trying to keep what we have alive, and so much of that has to do with just shifting our, you know, how we relate to our products, you know, and being willing to spend more money on things.
That's excellent to lead in for Harry.
Yeah.
Because you actually interface more with the consumer and the customer.
Yeah, I think, so I'm Harry. I do interior design. Moved to Newark like about 3 years ago from Brooklyn, like so many other people. I also teach at the New York School of Interior Design, and my class is called Advanced Trade Technique. What that means is that I talk about to the students, and this sort of is why Stephanie said this leads into my area. I teach the students about materials, which I feel is one of the most important lessons in interior design, because what do people do when they set out to do anything now is they type it into the computer or in like chat GT or like whatever it's called. I don't use it. I'm very bad with computers, I hate to admit. I don't even do CAD because I do everything by hand. So I'm sort of like a unicorn, which you can tell by my shoes. In any event, what I feel is happening a lot is that we as the general public do things that are sort of convenient and quick, and we want it the next day and we want it right now. And nobody in our quest to like always find the new, the different, reinventing the wheel, we sort of forget about where did we even come from, or where did this even start? And everybody thinks they're like reinventing the wheel and they're designing a chair. Meanwhile, that chair existed in the pyramids. But every designer says they designed the chair. Well, at least most chairs, not your design, it was in the pyramids. But that's again a different story. So with all that said, we are all responsible for what's happening to an extent, because it's all about the convenience and then of course the price. So, and I see this a lot with clients, because I can show whatever it is that I'm showing. The first question usually always is, well, can this be any less expensive? Can we make this cheaper? Can we make it quicker? Can we make it now? So what I feel has fallen off the wagon is the consumer education. And what I mean by that is, okay, this fabric is like maybe triple of what the Chinese fabric would be, just an example, but it also lasts 10 times as long. If you buy an upholstered piece at CB2 or Restoration Hardware, it doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't look good, but it might end up to be reupholstered in like 6 months because the quality is really bad. And so we've all been conditioned to sort of like, how does something look like? And most people would rather buy something that looks expensive and is bad quality than something that's good quality and not flashy. Let's just put it that way. So I don't know if that answers the question or sort of like goes into it, but everybody's oohing and ahhing at like, ooh, the mills are closing, and like, there's no one who can dye fabric anymore, and there's no this or there's no that. Well, do you have your shoes resoled when they're broken, or do you throw them away? And it's the throwaway approach that to me is the most significant thing that's happening to sort of make the end to like almost everything, because it's like, okay, I just buy it and it needs to last a year and then I throw it away. But and this is why when I talked to Stephanie about the Longwool, so it's like it has been around for like ever and a day. It's been proven, it's been used, and then like some of you said before, it has lost like its interest because it became too expensive or it wasn't applicable anymore after the Depression. But why? So it's I think it goes full circle, and like before we all go and like look for the new and the next and the never had been before here and like all that kind of stuff, why don't we go back to what really matters, which is sort of things that come from nature, things that are ecologically correct, or make sense ecologically, and don't need like this huge carbon footprint to make like a synthetic fabric. Let's just say that. Oh.
So all of that, and how depressing it is that our mills are closing and how people are buying cheap. But I'm going to bring it up a little bit because it is, we know what's hard about local farming. We know what's hard about local textile. We know what's hard about local design. Staying in that place, which has always been kind of a place where is near and dear to my heart, which is why I started this, but I never thought that I could look at it as a higher level potential in the market. I think we have something here with the Longwool that is visually different enough that we can get people excited to see and understand something different. That we don't have to sell to their hearts. That we don't have to sell on durability, which is all those things. But I think we can actually design, and this is why I want all the textile people to come in on this, because I think we can design in a way. I think there's so much, and again, I feel like I've barely scratched the surface, but I think we can do something visually compelling enough that people want that specifically, not because they're led by the local wool, because unfortunately a lot of people aren't. Like that might be where we are, but that's only some people go that way. And what we need is it to be something that the design world is excited about, and get it into the mill stream so that we can have mill woven yarns or mill spun yarns for weavers, because right now a lot of it of what I see is for knitters, because I think there's more market there, is that the knitters are buying the more local yarns. But I'm not seeing a nice grist for all of us weavers who are in here. But if we're interested in playing with it, Sunshine?
Is there an opportunity to get Longwools like into the carpet fiber market, right? Because you were talking about durability, and like nowhere is durability like more important than like upholstery fabrics and carpets, or I mean, I know designers who like very high-end world, but like they're selling their clients $300,000 carpets. And I realize that's like not everybody, and that's a massive, hand knotted carpet, what have you. But like if a rug company and like larger, established purveyors. It's one of the streams that we need to. It's this like I just think it's like a stream in the interiors world that like you could get Longwools if you could get Longwools into it, like and sell it on its durability and the green side of things. So some people care about, some people don't care about, whatever. A lot of people care about price point, but that could be an opportunity for that in addition to like maybe showcasing what the fiber can do in a woven or piled or whatever way that a shorter wool fiber is not doing.
Well, so there's a company that's recently coming called Cecil. Cecil. They are based out of North Carolina. It's a women-owned hand-woven rug and carpet company. They are buying almost all of the long wool that they can out of the Northeast. And I would say 90% of my wool goes to them right now. They are growing, and I would love to see them grow. So please all go buy Cecil rugs, because I think what they're doing is very cool. And that's exactly what they are trying to do, is they are trying to source local, they're trying to keep it American, and they are trying to bring kind of that idea of a, locally produced wool carpet back to the US, and to our market. I think one of the challenges, though, for me as a producer is the amount that they're willing to pay won't sustain my flock. The amount that I can get paid for my wool right now is between 90 cents and $1.10 per pound. My sheep are Longwools, so as you can tell, they make a lot of wool. So I'm getting, let's say, between 10 and 12 pounds of wool. That's how much it costs me to shear my sheep, let alone feed them year round, raise the lambs, pay for vet care, pay for hay to get them through the Northeast winters. I'm lucky in that I'm able to get that $1 a pound right now. That is more than a colored wool would have gone for 20 years ago in the Northeast. You would have been looking at zero out in the compost pile. So we're getting there, and the price point for most of their rugs is more than me as an average consumer is willing to pay, probably in the $3,000 range for a area rug, which is probably more than fair for what they're doing. But when you translate it all the way down to me as the producer, it's not enough for me to sustain my flock. My dream and my goal is to find a wool market that I can sustain my flock out of. This is not my full-time job. This is a hobby and something I'm super passionate about. And my goal has always been to not make money, that'd be great, but to sustain the hobby and the thing that I'm really passionate about. I'm almost there, but when I'm getting $1 per pound, I'm not there. I get my additional income through the knitter market and the hand spinner market and some of those more specialty markets, which are higher margin, lower volumes. And I know you probably have thoughts too. Cecil, Cecil.
So the work that I do is about scaling production beyond handcrafting. So I work in a cooperative manner with other brands to meet minimums. We come together to distribute the risk of making regional yarn. We make machine grade yarn. I have a card on the back table that shows the yarn that we make, and it happens to be a singles yarn. We are doing a lot of knitting with it. However, we started weaving with it as well, and it is a blend of Romney long wool with alpaca that's all sourced here in New York State. In terms of just pointing to this question of like how do we make things more desirable to the consumer, I recognized a long time ago that we had a lot of long wool Romney here in our region, and in terms of apparel production, it wasn't really appropriate, like for next to skin softness. So I started blending it with alpaca to soften it and make the hand a little more desirable, and it passes, as sweaters. We make socks, we make cowls and beanies and gloves, like all sorts of things, blankets, lots of different products out of it. So that's something I just wanted to bring up about that, but also just speaking to the price of the long wool. So our co-op pays between $2.50 to $5 to our growers. Okay, we do that because we move ourselves to the beginning of that value chain. Like at every and the clothing and textile value chain is like, you start with the raw wool, you wash it, the price goes up, right? Then you start to process it, the price point goes up. You spin it, etc. You turn it into a product, right? As brands, designers, we enter that value chain in the middle when we're purchasing yarn from a distributor or even later on when we're buying fabric, from a supplier. So by moving to the beginning of that value chain, which is what our cooperative does, right? We put ourselves right at the beginning. We can make better decisions as brands, as designers, about what we're investing in. And it also cuts out the intermediaries. So it changes the model. That is an economic shift. By moving to the beginning of the value chain, we're changing the economic shape of things. And by moving to the beginning, we can see the whole process as well. So it's really significant to do that. And that enables us to pay more than, to pay our growers what they deserve, especially our growers who are participating in environmental programs, which is what I'm coordinating that in our region. And we're putting back, we're not just extracting from the earth, we're actually putting back. Our environmental program is based on the carbon cycle. It's climate beneficial. So it's about this idea of reciprocity and giving back and not just taking. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that there are new alternative ways of thinking about how to stream money to our growers.
I agree, and that's also what I love about your economic vision, because you're very involved in how to restructure and change that textile system. And talking about the durability of the long wool, that's again kind of where my mind had started to, because it seems very obvious. That's the thing it has over most other fibers. I think it's also the hardest to prove over time in a quick culture. So when I was talking to Harry about this, and I was all excited about we're going to talk about wool, and he started asking me questions. He said, so what was it used for in the past? Because I knew that it was a huge part of the British Empire's textile wealth. And he's like, but what was it used? Who used it? And he sent me down this long rabbit hole where I ended up talking with this doctor in Norwich, if anyone can correct me on my pronunciation, in England, and we now have all these books that we've been sharing back and forth about the incredible British worsteds that are very, very fine. And they're used for a different part of the quality. The durability's there, but they're also very fine. They're very shiny. They take color up like silk or linen. Still on the long wool. But they're used in this type of fabric that's very fine and very finely spun. We have a couple of books back here that you can flip through that show the British worsteds from the mid-1700s, the mid-1800s. And after that, the industry kind of started falling apart for economic reasons, and cotton and on. But what it's capable of is more than just thickness, more than just durability. It can actually look more like a silk damask. It's not going to be as soft. It's going to have a different quality. It's going to be wool. It's going to have all the properties of wool, but it's going to be strong, and it's drapey, and it's beautiful. And that's where I think as designers, I think we can really push forward a little bit more if we, and so to me it's getting the mills to spin us a finer yarn, spin us something that's not focused on rugs, something that's not focused on carpets. Because I think then we can take it into something that seems much different. Hi, Jean.
Curious, in the beginning you were speaking about the fact that it doesn't shrink the same way
It
that
doesn't.
wool does. Is there some property to it that makes it less?
Do you know the properties?
It's amazing.
That it doesn't shrink. It doesn't shrink. It shrinks less than linen does. So in my samples, which, at some point when we break up, you can pull everything apart, it shrinks less than my linens do, which was amazing. I always think of wool as being the more, but definitely compared to most wools I'm used to. Go ahead, you can talk about the scales and the...
Yeah, it may have to do with the crimp, which is if you look at our hair and the curl of my wool, that's what we call crimp. So if you look at the crimp of a merino, do you remember back in the 90s, I hear it's coming back, crimped hair, the zigzag, right? That's what that's what a merino looks like. And if you were to look at merino fiber, it has that zigzaggy crimp to it, right? Whereas the long wool has that locking structure, which is due to how the scales lay down the fiber. So it probably has something to do with that, along with how elastic it is lengthwise versus other fibers. And there's some really interesting statistics out there, and I don't know it off the top of my head, but you can bend, how many times you can bend a wool. 20,000 times a wool fiber can be bent back and forth before it breaks, which is incredibly durable compared to anything we've been able to create out of plastics and even linens and cottons.
Yeah, and the shrinkage is also because of the length, like the length, right? Because when you think about like wool, particularly like if you have something that's woolen spun, you know, you have all these ends that are crisscrossing, right? And that's a perfect moment, you know, to have things felt, right? Especially, right, with heat and pressure and moisture, what makes things felt, right? So, and if you have like everything combed and long, less likely to felt. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah. So we just had a question actually about does long wool felt? It's not great. So when I have a lot of people who are needle felters, which is a whole other craft than we've been talking about, ask if my roving can be used for felting. Yeah, but it's probably not going to be great compared to some medium and fine wools. And again, it has to do with the length of the actual fiber itself as well as the scales. Any wool will felt due to the scales, which is why you always say whenever you buy something that's wool, you don't wash it in hot soapy water because that is the equation for felting. But a long wool will be more resilient to felting and pilling over time.
Now I mentioned that we're getting our next batch of yarn spun in the woolen equipment, right? So it's been cut, right? They cut our long wool. So it will be really interesting later on down the line in our manufacturing with our knitters and weavers, like once we start doing the finishing on the product. Because we might need to finish things differently. We will, I know it. We're gonna have to launder things differently because laundering's like part of the finishing process. So things will probably shrink more, right? Because it's spun in the woolen.
But even so,
My true woolen prep, hand spun yarn, does not shrink
Oh,
in the long wools the way that you would expect. So
but it's homespun.
it is homespun, but it's true woolen, where usually we're getting kind of a semi. So like I don't understand the scientific part of it. I just know there's something different happening in it.
Textile science person. You remember from textile science?
you knew the 20,000
I know, that was impressive. You could throw that out there. Even when I had it on as a warp and I was doing comparisons between regular worsted Jagger spun wools and the hand spun worsted prep long wools, when I would tension it, everything was even. But whenever I would release it, all of the regular yarns would still kind of hold their shape and the long wools would just drape. They just don't have that bounce back. They don't have that give. They're very, very drapey. And so I think somehow all that plays in textile science. So again, we need lots more people to ask lots of questions that we don't know.
You know, I have to say the long wools also have less merino in them. Less lanolin than the merino fibers. You know, like there's a big difference, like in the scouring process. So that could have something to do with it also.
Yeah, I did the fermented suet method.
Sorry?
I did the fermented suet method with it, which was, it wasn't. It was amazing.
Oh, to remove the lanolin.
And it was just about enough, and now you one final wash. So you can actually let your fleeces soak, and they begin to ferment, and it will remove most of the dirt and lanolin from them, and you don't need to go through the heavy scouring processes with the long wools, which is all very interesting and smelly.
Yeah, so just kind of like back up for those of you who aren't in the sheepy world, lanolin is the natural oil that sheep produce, and that's when you like feel some of my raw wools over there, you'll get kind of like a soft oily feeling on your fingers. A Lincoln long wool of my sheep, if you were to wash that, you would lose, they say about 30% of the weight comes out in lanolin. I find that it's probably closer to 25% in what I've done. Whereas a merino, you might lose up to 50%. So if you have a 10 pounds of fleece, 50% of that's going to be oils in a merino, whereas 2.5 to 3 pounds of that is going to be oils in a long wool, or at least mine.
Okay, sorry. You're getting more quantity per pound.
Higher yield per pound of wool.
And you're getting like a product that is like basically home washable. So like if it's not shrinking, like I mean, we all have to send our sweaters out to the dry cleaner, or you don't, you wash them by hand and then you roll them in a towel and you wash them or whatever, right? But like most people aren't doing that. Most people are sending their sweaters to the dry cleaner. If they knew that they could like put their sweater in.
Definitely would not do that. No. And like I said, any wool, because of the fiber structure and those scales, will felt if given the appropriate combination of heat, soap, agitation, and water. So I definitely would not do anything other than hand wash or dry clean them. It's just what she's saying in the weaving process that shrinkage is for some reason less. So can you explain shrinkage a little bit more to us non-weavers?
So shrinkage is exactly that. Your wool sweater shrinks when you wash it poorly, So here's one of the concept pieces that I made. The black wool is a regular mill spun yarn. It's from Jagger Spun. It is a worsted prep. The white wool is a hand spun Lincoln, and so it goes in the plaid pattern. But when I washed it, it was the black that, and yes, the white wool shrunk a little bit, it drew up, but it's the black that shrunk, and so it created this really interesting texture because of the shrinkage differential. This piece over here is all long wool, and so you don't have a shrinkage differential. Instead, that one has a combination of worsted prep and woolen prep, and then I napped it. And so when we're done, get up and you can feel it, and you can feel there's almost like these islands of like mohair haloing, and then where it didn't pull up, because that's just the difference in the yarn prep right there. But there's no shrinkage differential in this one. The other one is up here, where you see all the puckering. That's the same thing with the shrinkage differential. That's on a linen warp, and then it's a Jagger Spun Jagger Spun worsted, regular yarn, and then the long wool. And the long wool is the one that has more light coming through, because it didn't draw up as much, and it has the pucker. Laura?
You said that you washed those two concept pieces. How do you like to do your washing of your wool?
So I did a lot of sampling first before I did to decide which ones, and that one I washed really hard to try and get to drop as much as possible before I napped it. And this one I think I machine washed it, but gently. Yeah.
But this one you washed like.
That one I definitely machine washed. Yeah, that one I definitely machine washed. This one over here, I spun really fine. It's on a linen warp. And so that's more of a casement to where you have the light coming through, but you can feel the drape of it. And so that one I really wanted to focus on the drape and the luster. I didn't want it to shrink. And I definitely didn't even want the linen to shrink in that one. So that one I very gently washed in a tub.
You just passed it over the idea of water.
Yes. Yes. Gently. I whispered. Wash. Yeah, but, and then the one in the back was just in a hot tub and then cold rinses. So I wanted a little bit of agitation, but not a lot, but just enough to get the other wool to really pull in. Which also, the samples, I put samples in all of your bags, and they're based on that one. And so you can just see that luster and the shrinkage differential that I feel like is the thing that we can work with the most in the beginning.
I have follow-up washing questions.
Brilliant insights.
I've been washing a lot of twill wool blankets, and I'm listening to you wondering if I should dial it in a little bit. And the answer in weaving is always yes, it's possible to dial something in. I'm wondering if you
is much more in linen. So I'm going to speak from just my play in building the concept pieces. One, I tend to use power scour because it doesn't attack the protein. So you want to use a wool specific, because otherwise a lot of them are for removing protein stains. You don't want a regular detergent. Yeah, that's another one. The Eucalyptus. And then two, test, sample, make notes. Lots and lots and lots of notes. And then dial it in. The yarns you're choosing, the weave you're choosing, all of it makes a difference. But the main thing is using the right detergent and then test. The only time I've used vinegar was actually on linens when I felt like my pH was off and I was getting this weird staining. But generally, I've not gone to vinegar. But I know a lot of people do. I feel like that's kind of part of the thing in the craft world, is that there are so many ways to approach any particular process. I do have some really good resources on wool washing, though, I'd be happy to send. Let's see, with just different ideas.
It's fascinating how many different methods you have to really control the final product. That's control is amazing.
The beauty of handcraft. And then how can we get it like up into, because like Laura, and like that's like I love spinning. I spun 12,000 yards of singles for this project, and in the end I feel like I became a decent spinner because of that.
You're spinning better than people who were like, I'm a spinner.
But if I had the consistency to really pull out of the fiber what I think it can do, then we'd be off and going somewhere. And it's wonderful, it's like therapeutic, I love it, but there's no business in spinning. Ultimately, this is a business. And we can love the business we're in. And there's the people who are on the handcraft side who are doing it just for the hobby of it, and that feeds into all the knowledge that we're all working with. And so I feel, there's a whole line of representation in this room. And each thing that we do is really, really valuable to helping to tell the story and how we're learning the next thing. So yes, learning to spin, which I spent like a year doing that, and half the time I was like, I don't know that I can call this work. I don't know that I can call this work. But it is. It's still like it helped to get to this point of understanding a little bit more, but it only gives me the sense of how much more we have to go and how much more we have to learn about how to finish and weave and structure.
It's just, a lot of these comments are kind of just making me reflect on kind of like putting pieces together. So like, how many of you know how to knit? Okay, more than I thought. How many of you, your grandmothers knew how to knit? Probably everyone, right? And so it's kind of this like generational loss of knowledge, that like, why are some of these mills and stuff closing? Well, they have no succession plan. Like maybe there was a way, but nobody was really interested in the business, or they didn't have anyone to teach, right? We're seeing that in a lot of our trades here in the US, is we've gone so hard in one direction that we're losing a lot of this like institutional knowledge. And or they don't have brothers, yeah. And I almost feel like this fabric concept is like very similar. It's like you can go back in time and see that we were doing these really cool things with these fibers almost 300 years ago. Why can't we do that now? What is it that we've lost, and how do we reteach ourselves, the value and how to redo it? And I think a lot of it is just this like institutional knowledge and succession of knowledge for everything from farming, which for a long time in our culture was not looked highly upon. I think it still isn't in a lot of ways. But then like turning something that's agriculture, which is my passion, but also my career, into these like high-end fabrics that are used in the design world. And I think that's what's so cool about natural fibers, is like kind of connecting the land and actual people to an end product. And I think, you mentioned that there's not a lot of interest in like, oh, this is a New York product, or this is a local wool. I do think there is something to be said about having a story to tell in how things are processed, whether it's like how you're treating the animals, whether it's what Laura's doing in terms of some of the carbon farming pieces. there are stories that are going to be interesting, and I would love to know, Harry, even from your perspective, like what are the stories and the things that are interesting to your clients that would make them choose and pay more for a certain fabric type? You know, the things that are going to resonate with a consumer that like make it worth it for someone like me.
Well, I mean, that goes back to what we said before. It's like there is really, from my perspective, no such thing as like consumer education. So the same way that there is like a prefabricated view in people's minds what it is that interior designers do, the same way don't most people know about all the different materials and what they mean, what they can do, what the quality perspective is, what the price points are. I mean, people get fed certain things, and what in my view gets lost, and I see this with the students, unfortunately, the natural sense of curiosity and sort of like, ooh, I really want to like experience this, I want to find out about it, I want to research it, I want to look at it. That all has fallen by the wayside in some way, shape, or form, which is very sad.
So is it your job to tell your clients, like, do you have to do the storytelling and consumer education?
Yes, I do,
Is
and
that a big-
I actually like doing that too, because I think it is so interesting to me, the reaction that people have when you sort of talk about materials and like, I mean, most people have no idea what does it take to make a custom fabric, what does it take to do a custom wall finish. Anything that has to do with handwork, with an art, with a craft, most people don't know what that means and where does it come from. So, I mean, I'm certainly not someone who knows everything about these things, but, you know, I can sort of lead people and take them by the hand and sort of explain why they should use or choose this as opposed to that. It's sort of like similar to what you're eating, you know, which is like another thing that we could talk for hours about. It's like if you start thinking about what you're putting into yourself, it changes your perspective on everything. And it's sort of like the same thing with materials, like what do you choose and what do you pick? And how much are you paying for it and how much are you willing to pay for it? And, you know, unfortunately, all the hand-done things that, you know, most people in this room probably value are not as valuable to other people in the population. So that's where the consumer education, I mean, and if you look at it, like, you know, we said that before, it's all about let's get something quick and then throw it away and then move on to something else. So that whole idea of like throwaway mentality is just so prevalent now. And you know, if you really look at yourself, we all do it. You know, it's like, oh, should I recycle this or not? Should I put this here or should I put it there? Should I reuse it or just give it to someone else or should I throw it away? It's, you know, the throwaway mentality is, I think, what sort of destroyed a lot of that. And what I see mainly, because I do teach it, and when I go to all the people that perform these different crafts and do these special finishes, none of them has successors. Like, none of them has the son, the daughter, because everybody wants to make 6 digits and get insurance and not really work more than 2 days a week and stay at home as much as they can. So, you know, that's sort of, it's a weird thing, but it's really there. And it's like, you know, we all see the cobblers are closing in this. I mean, they used to be on every corner. I mean, there used to be in the garment district in New York, like thousands of people that did outline quilting, for example, for the interior design world, because there was a fashion and everybody wanted to do everything outline quilted. If you now want to do outline quilting, there's like one company in Long Island that does that. So,
Okay, really quick, what is outline quilting?
well, it is when you have a printed fabric with a design and you quilt around the design to make them poofy. I mean, it's sort of like, you know, it's not like the seersuckery quality of what you did, but it sort of gives it like another dimension.
Texture, and
Well, it's upholstery within the fabric.
that makes sense. So in your world, what would be the thing, because I'm thinking from a textile design side, and we know it's going to be a high cost in the beginning. We know that it's a big lift. We know that, you know, we're going against the tide and trying to introduce something new against the tide. But what would you say?
But it's not new.
New
So,
to,
you know,
new
and
to this moment. New to this moment.
New to this moment, and this is great because, you know, when you read up about what is desirable for people when they're picking a fabric, I mean, I'm just now talking about hospitality, I'm talking about, you know, airplanes and boats and like all that kind of stuff. I mean, if you read about the long wool, it's the perfect material for it. And, you know, you and I talked about it. We said, like, you know, lots of things that other fabrics have to go through, like rigorous treatments to have like a certain quality, like flammability, which is like automatically like taken care of in the long wool.
Right. Does everyone know that wool is fire resistant? It's one of the most amazing qualities that it has. Okay. Anusha first. Anusha first. Yeah.
I wanted to make a point about the education just for a moment because I think it's like really critical that that we connect to the materials. And you know, I teach as well at Parsons, and it is just essential to have students engage with materials and understand like the innate qualities of materials. And I have to say, I have a very strong background in making, and I manufacture now, but I have a much better time talking to the manufacturers because I understand materials and I understand how they behave, and I understand, you know, engaging with equipment, and you know, I just think it's really important. And then, so that's the first thing about education. The second thing is, you know, at the end of that value chain that I spoke of earlier, who's at the end of that but the consumer, you know? And we really have to, if we want to create a shift in what we were all talking about like how we value things, you know, and illuminating the deep value of what we're doing, we have to educate the consumer as well. You know, that we raise awareness about the provenance of materials, about what really goes into making a sweater, or you know, or a yard of cloth, you know, that is sourced regionally, and yeah. So that's another thing. Like that education is so critical. Thanks.
Oh, okay. Hi. So this is all really great. So I'm an architect, and yesterday I was actually at the New York Passive House conference, I guess, and I was on the natural materials panel because I do a lot of bioregional research with Kaya. Cool. I don't know if you guys know who that is, but anyway, this was a big topic of conversation as well. Was just because we were talking about materials like straw panels for architectural construction and hemp, and these are thought of as alternative materials. And I teach a class at Parsons as well, construction technology too, and I told my students at the beginning of it that I'm teaching you about materials that are called alternative, but they're not. We shouldn't say that. They're just materials that you should be speccing, right? Like that you should just introduce to your projects right away, to your clients right away, and talk about them as if they're conventional, right? I think it really is about like us on the end where we know what we know about introducing these materials, and introducing the standards that are associated with them as professional, as like in the same, I guess, vein of conventional materials, so that they are just, they're on the menu, you know? Like, I think that's a big deal. One of the comments at the conference was exactly that, like, or one of the presentations that was given was a straw panel home, and the architect was talking about how she introduced that to the client and they got excited about it. So they didn't even know about this, right? And it's you introduce it and you start talking about the benefits, and then people are bought into this idea that it's possible. So I do think it's on us a little bit to bring this into a mainstream. The other thing that I was going to say is I think the standards around Longwool as a product are really compelling, and one of the things I always find that clients ask about obviously cost is one of them, but the other thing is how can I trust this? I think we're in this moment where we trust industry so much. Like there's industrial seals and there's like proof and standards that everyone has to meet, and the consumer trusts that, right? So there needs to be some level of, I don't want to say like standardization, or I want to say there needs to be some way to rate, or I guess create the trust around these natural materials the same way that their synthetic counterparts have that, in order for them to enter this like industrial mainstream. Yeah.
Everybody's talking about education. It has to start back with the kids in school. They took away all that in for the kids. I mean, in Switzerland, the kids have to know how to knit, and they know how to weave. We know nothing. We don't even have workshop anymore, wood shop. So that's where it really needs to start. And as the three of us, I mean, we hang around. We're in Elmendorf Hand Spinners Guild. We're at the fairs, and it's amazing how the kids come up, and adults, and go, well, that's how a sweater is made? Because we're sitting there spinning and weaving, and it's great. So they want to know. It's just not out there anymore.
Thank you.
So I kind of feel like we've done a pretty good job of talking for a long time. Anyone else have any questions or thoughts, or want to? Yeah.
I just wanted to share with whoever it was that said we don't teach kids this stuff in school anymore. I have a almost 13-year-old, and sorry. I have an almost 13-year-old, and I have to say I'm really happy because they have a health or like a home and careers class, and like he's having to learn how to like sew buttons and cook. And like, as a parent, it's like really, I know it's like just a tiny, tiny little step, but it's very heartwarming to see that like he's getting those lessons, and while he might not be interested in me teaching him that, because he's definitely not, that it is happening, and there are little steps. So,
Is that a public school?
Yeah, it's New Paltz.
Oh.
New Paltz Public School, yeah.
I know that when my kids were in, I guess, middle school, they took like a home ec class, and what they made was Rice Krispie treats. And I was ready to like drop everything and go get a home ec degree, so like teach them how to eat bread and,
I'm a school teacher as well. I teach middle school in Red Hook. And being in the education world, I came from advertising in the city, and I changed careers 5 years ago, and I've been teaching for 5 years. So coming from an advertising, into a very, anyway, there are ways that we as parents or community members can push schools to provide these kinds of services. If you get into the board, if you help out with clubs, if you're like an advocate for these kinds of classes and things you want the kids in the community to partake, the schools, from my perspective, and like New Paltz and this area, tends to be really welcoming of ideas, and they try to do their best to, especially PTAs. So there is ways that we can do that on a very hyper-local space. And I'm seeing that in Red Hook as well. We have a home ec as well. We have after-school clubs. There's a knitting club, and that's like because the teacher loves to knit, so she is doing that for the students. So there's hope. I see it.
Yeah, also just a plug for a really awesome resource we have here in New York called New York Agriculture in the Classroom. It's through Cornell University. And they develop curriculum around agricultural topics, and they do have a fiber, like sheep and fiber curriculum, along with so many other really cool things. That's all free curriculum that's available to anybody who wants to use it. So if you do have kids or grandkids in school, That's a really, really awesome resource. And oftentimes your Cornell Cooperative Extension Office, which every single county in New York State has a Cornell Cooperative Extension Office, may have an agricultural educator, and that is their purpose, is to bring agricultural curriculum and that New York Ag in the Classroom program to schools. So I highly recommend that you look that up. They have a couple different kids books. One of them is called Weaving the Rainbow, which I don't know if you knew about that. I should have brought it. But it's a really great book about how it goes like from sheep to textile, and then they create different hands-on activities that go with these books. And that's like how a lot of their curriculum is based off of, like, let's take a children's book that's very accurate and create like a curriculum and hands-on activities around that. So it's a really great resource.
I wonder if there's any hope in the near future of letting hobbyists like myself get a cone, you know? Like, I'm not going to spin long wool. I buy my wool on cones. So, like, that's another aspect of the education, is having someone like me be excited to buy 5 pounds of it.
Yeah. So Stephanie and I are kind of working on that. So for me to get a batch of yarn made, I'm spending several $1,000s upfront that I then maybe get back over several years. I do it because I love it, but that is not in the cards for a lot of people. It's a 9 to 18 month process from the time that I shear my sheep till I get yarn back in my hands, and a huge upfront cost that, again, I'm willing to make because it's something that I find really cool. I'm not making any money off of it. So in order for me as a producer to go beyond my hand spinners market that I feel very comfortable in, I need to be ensured that I have someone that I can sell it to. So Stephanie is hopefully maybe going to be applying for a grant to allow her to design, you can speak a little bit more about this, but design a yarn on a cone that would be suitable for weaving that we could then use my wool for. And then it's, this is a grant process, right? It's not like a long-term viability thing, but it's a start to try to get it out there, because it's not something that I'm really willing to invest in right now without knowing that I have a market, because I can't just have thousands of dollars of product just sitting there that I've invested in that's not going back into my business. So I know that's not like a helpful answer, but it's kind of just speaks to sort of like the cart before the horse of this industry and kind of this system that we're dealing with.
That was kind of part of why I want to do this, is if there are enough weavers who are interested in having this type of wool in a yarn, and we can come together kind of like Laura's doing, and decide what we want, right? If there's a spin we want, if there's a weight we want, then we can actually pool it up and split the costs. I think it has to be on us, and us communicating, working together, and deciding what we want. Because then, and so Louis Cleal of Nobletown Fiberworks couldn't be here today, but he sent some samples of. He spun them up on Monday so he could get them here for us, which was so lovely. So we've got Gotland, Cotswold, and Border Leicester over there. So take a look at that. All British Longwools, yes. Thank you for always making sure that we're, yeah. I just like throwing it out there. And then there's also a Lincoln Longwool from Allison Chi, who I think got her Lincolns from you. So look at those. But there are some on cones. And it gives us a place of conversation to start looking at what we would be interested in. And I think he would work with us if one of us wanted a little bit tighter spin, a little bit different grist. I think he would work with us in a larger batch. But I think that's the answer, is to look and work together. Let's see. Elise?
Speak a little about the livestock conservancy. Maybe that's something for Emmaline to
Yeah,
talk about.
actually, Emmaline, that's a perfect one. And we can kind of wrap up with this one, because it's a good wrapping topic, is the Livestock Conservancy and how.
Yeah, because you're involved. Yeah. So here in the U.S. as well as in the U.K., there's a couple different organizations that are trying to promote rare breeds. So one of the things that we should mention is the Lincoln Longwool is a rare breed. I'm one of only about 60 people in the U.S. that have this breed of sheep. A lot of these breeds are very historical, and so the Livestock Conservancy works to promote rare and heritage breeds and all of the wonderful characteristics they make. So we were just having this conversation earlier with some people about golden doodles are great, right? But they're like a mix that someone decided to make to appease other people, which is great, right? But there's also value in preserving the golden retriever and the poodle for what they were originally designed to do, right? Think about that in the livestock world, and that's what the Livestock Conservancy here in the US is trying to do, along with the Rare Breeds Conservancy in the UK. And they look at all these different breeds, from chickens, turkeys, rabbits, donkeys, all different kinds of livestock, and look at all of the different breeds and say, what are the ones that are at the risk of not existing anymore? And Lincolns fall into the threatened category, which is the most rare, if you will, and on the verge of essentially being extinct as a breed. And so that's one of the things I'm really passionate about, and why I'm so excited about this project is because we decided that there was no value to the breed because there was no value to Longwool, right? And that has this ripple effect of suddenly, why would we have this breed of sheep? And why am I one of only 60 people in the whole US that have this breed of sheep when it has such desirable characteristics? So kind of just, to come full circle, breed preservation is a huge part of why I exist and why I do what I do and why I'm willing to invest in making yarn and doing some of these cool projects, even though it may not immediately have financial value to me, is because I really feel like preserving some of these rare breeds and the reason why they existed is so cool. If you go to Lincoln in the UK, which is the capital of Lincolnshire, which is where the Lincoln Longwool comes from, there are stained glass sheep in the Lincoln Cathedral all over the place. And that is because the Lincoln was so important to the prosperity of Lincolnshire and what really built that region and that county of Lincoln back in the 1700s and 1800s. Like, you had this big breed of sheep that made so much wool and made so much money for this region. It was that important that they felt the need to incorporate it into their cathedral. And I just think that's really cool, and I want to see that here, and I want to see that people get excited about breed-specific yarns and understanding not just like the characteristics and that longevity piece, but like, where did they come from? What is the story, and why are they important?
Shave them to save them part?
Yeah.
I know 4 ounces isn't going to keep you.
Yeah, sure. Yep. So I am a Livestock Conservancy member. My membership might not be up to date, but yeah. So the Livestock Conservancy a few years ago started a program called Shave 'em to Save 'em. And if you sign up for the program, it's free. You get a little passport in the mail. And if you buy 4 ounces of wool, it can be raw wool, it can be roving, it can be yarn, and create a project out of that 4 ounces of wool. You get a sticker from me as the person who provided you with that wool. And it's a way to encourage people to use some of these different breeds of sheep. Everything from the Lincoln Longwool to the Navajo Churro, which is an indigenous breed from the southwest of the US, and all these different breeds in between. To just really encourage people to break out of that superwash fine merino mindset and kind of do like a self-guided exploration of breed-specific yarns and breed-specific wool. So I can give you more information, and I do have stickers available if that's a program that you guys are interested in doing to explore different breeds.
Okay, and then one final fun fact on talking about Lincolnshire is that these were so valuable to that time period that there was an export restriction. They were not allowed, the fleeces and the sheep were not allowed to be sold outside of Britain. And so there's a whole black market to get these fleeces into France because France was wanting these particular wools because they made such exquisite fabric. So that was a fun little thing that I read in a book in the 1700s when they were trying to pass the laws and figure out how to deal with the black market to France. But there's a whole fabulous history here. Maybe next time, and if I have everybody's emails, I'll find some pictures of the fabrics to share around of what they were making. It's quite exquisite.
Because they didn't want competition, right? They wanted to corner the market on the...
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Always competition.
I think the punishment was like possibly coming off your hands or something like that.
Now that's severe.
I was thinking something like that.
That part. It's a lot of fun little tidbits, but that's a new one for me. That's a great one. If only still today, right? Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming, for being with us. And feel free to go up, feel everything, got all the samples out. We all have a little bit about what we do, and we're here, ask questions. But thank you so much for sharing your time with us.